Hello, everyone. So this is our introduction to Spark machine learning library session, and I'm Yelena. So here is today's agenda. I'm gonna remind you some of the new skills that you've been learning, including key reminders for assignment 2. We're gonna look a little bit about the markdown for Jupyter Notebook. We're gonna look about parser function, and I'll show you exactly what that is. We're gonna talk about using the pipeline and a lot of tips for part 2 of the assignment, including an additional example of logistic regression model for Framingham data. So this is a bonus example. It's not, there are some visualization examples in there that not necessarily that you're asked to do, but that's something that I would like you to take away from this session, let's say. Okay? And of course, as always, your questions. All right? So, what new skills you're learning? You're learning how to work in a cloud. So mainly, you're not working on your PC, right? Well, on your PC, of course, the memory is limited, but you can run the programs for as long as you need to, right? But here, instead, you're working on a cloud. And the big benefits are that the data that you are uploading has been backed up. You're using the real computational power, and you're using the services. However, you by now, hopefully, you learn to manage the resources on a cloud. You have 10 capacity hours per month. It's not 10 clock hours, it's 10 capacity hours, and certain service consumes certain number of hours, right? So it's 1.5 hours for Spark. So that's about 6 clock hours per month, right? A little less. All right. So attention, please do not enter credit card number. By all means, you're not gonna get more hours. What's gonna happen is your account will convert to pay as you go, and you not only be charged, but the functionalities that are available on pay as you go account are different from functionalities that you have an academic account. So please. Excellent question. So 10 hours, yes, when the next month starts, you're going to be credited up to, you're going to be credited 10 hours, right? It's not plus 10 hours, but you will have 10 hours. It does not matter how many you will have used by the end of the month. When the month ends, they're going to be 10 hours, but it goes, I believe it's in the UK time zone, something like that. So probably by 9 p.m.-ish on the last day of the month, Eastern time, something like that. But yes, you will get 10 hours again for next month. But if you burn your hours before the month ends, you won't be able to do you won't be able to do part 1 and 2 of assignment 2 until next month. Okay? But please do not put credit card. Entering credit card is not gonna give you the hours. It will convert your account to pay as you go. Okay, no problem, Tiffany. That's an excellent question. I'm glad you asked. So you will need the hours for the next assignment, but the next assignment R will consume 1 capacity hour per hour. This one is 1.5. Next assignment, there will be 2 parts. There will be the database part, which does not consume capacity hours, and R part. R consumes the hours. All right? But no worries, the next month is coming for next assignment. Let's just worry about this assignment for right now. Please don't put credit card. Well, I have to say it because 2 people made this mistake already this semester. So And please do not upgrade IBM Cloud account. Make sure to stop the runtime environment before you exit, because what happens, it consumes the hours until it times out. And I have seen the student with a counter of hours to 100. I was surprised. How could you consume 100 hours if you only get 10? Well, because the service keeps on running and the counter keeps on going up, 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 up. So, and it does not check that you reached 10. The service would not stop, and it just keeps on running and running and running, and you won't be able to do any more work until next month, unfortunately. So please do yourself a favor. You want to stop the notebook, right? Please do not contact IBM. Use Salesforce to submit tickets if you need assistance. And please respond to email from the service desk, right? Because I'm gonna give you the proposed solution and need to know whether that solution worked for you or not. All right. Well, please upload the data into the project before you start creating the notebook. Have things ready. Do not delete object storage, and please do not open two notebooks in the edit mode, because you are actually running the service. You're running that twice, right? So you're running Spark twice. You don't want to consume the twice hours. Do not skip cells when you run the notebook. You want to run everything starting from the top, not from the middle, right? And all notebook cells must be executed in the order starting from the top, right? So make sure that all code returns correct results, and I'll show you today. Remember correct runtime environment. At the moment, we are using Spark 3.4, Python 3.10. So that still applies, right? When you upload your notebook, you must select correct environment. If you selected the wrong environment, right, you will need to delete and re-upload the notebook. But deleting the notebook does not just stop the environment. So please keep doing yourself a favor, right? Before you log off, you want to go to, see right now, this is the IBM Cloud Pak for Data. Always go to Administration, Environmental Runtime. You want to see whether you have anything running right now. If you have something active, it will show here. And under Actions, you will see the option to delete. It means to stop, right? So this is counter. This is going up, right? This is what I have consumed, and this is what I have remaining, right? So that's a correct environment. Make sure you select correct environment, okay? A markdown cell syntax. So you may have noticed that if you look at a Titanic notebook or any notebook, what do you have? You have level 1 heading. And if you open the notebook in edit mode, right? Like any notebook, like I'm gonna go and open another notebook in the edit mode. So that's a summer. That's a project that I created last time, but I also added another notebook, and I'm gonna give you a copy of this notebook. But what I'm looking at right now, I'm gonna go click here and I'm gonna click edit. As soon as I click edit, what am I starting? I'm starting my runtime environment, right? But in a notebook, I want you to know that there are different types of cells, right? There are markdown cells. Markdown, it's similar to, it's not quite the HTML, but you can add HTML to it to create tables. So I'll show you. So now it's starting in instantiating the environment. So here is my notebook, right? What is this? So this is a markdown cell. Why? Because this is not an executable code cell, right? It's a header. So if I double click on this, this is a syntax for the header. You put single hashtag. See that? Single hashtag, and then put this is a header. And when I run it, this is how it looks like nicely. That's what I was saying. This is just the text. right? Nothing here but just the text. I double click here. What is this? This is a level 2 heading. I call it table of context. What is this? This is a bulleted list, right? So see this, I want to use the bullet like this, dotted bullets. So the syntax is this. This is line here. There's a hyphen here. It followed by 2 spaces. This is just the syntax, how to create the bulleted list in Markdown cell. Then what you do is to specify the menu. What's a menu? Each link in here, right? Each of this is a link to a section in a document. So if I click here, see this? This is the anchor. There is a section ID called Framingham data. See this? So this is a link, and it takes me to the anchor called Framingham data. And here is my anchor in here. See? So that's how that's configured. I configured it as a bulleted list, and then for each of these options, you have an ID. See? So this is an anchor in a document where you want to go when the link is clicked. Like, for example, see this? I want to click on the load libraries. It's going to take to the section called load libraries. And if I double click, do you see this? That's an anchor here, right? And it says, this is a level 2 heading, and it's called load libraries. And this is a text. It describes what this code is doing. And I've got comments about the code, and I've got my libraries, right? And of course, I already ran this code, but I'm going to give you this notebook with the output, all right? So that way, what you could do, you could just open it in a view mode, and I'll show you how to open in a view mode shortly. But what else is here? Well, this here link is an external link, right? So external links have their own syntax because I have to specify how the link is displayed, and then I have to specify where the link takes, right? So see this? So if I double click on this again, see this? It shows here, that's just the syntax. You specify how the link is displayed, and you specify the external source where the link takes you, right? And I spelled out the syntax for you in here. See this? Link text in the brackets, and in parentheses, you specify the link URL. Then also you have a table. Well, what is this? This is a table, right? I wrote this, there's a little HTML in here that you can reuse. So here, opening tag, it opens a table tag. You have opening table tag, and you have a closing table tag, right? Each table consists of rows and data, right? TR starts the table row, and a closing TR, right, ends the table row. TD, table data, which is what table cell, right? So if I look at this, take a look at how many cells I have, and notice something special about the last cell. Last cell spans across multiple rows, right? So what I did in here, see that the first cell is just nothing, right? It's just blank. In the next cell, second cell, I want to say the word variable. It's a column header, but I want to display it in bold. So this is B stands for bold, right? Then in another one, it's a header called description. And then in the next cell, I specify the image. This is the external image URL, right? So if I take this link in here, this is a valid image. If I take this link and paste it in the new tab, this is the image. You can, if you are interested, you can just search the Google images and take the image URL, right? It has to end with PNG or GPG, something like that. That's optional, but I just put it in there. All right, and this cell spans across 17 rows, right? So each row under has one cell less. Why it has one cell less? It's because the top, in the top row, the last cell spans multiple rows. right? So here it's just the cell, and I just listed all my column names. But because in Python the numbering starts from position 0, right? The elements in the list starts at position 0. I just numbered it from 0 through 16. So that was about this markdown cell, and I had to go to edit mode. I had to go to edit mode, unfortunately, in order to show the syntax, right? But right now, what I'll do, I have to stop kernel. Look, I shut down the kernel. I don't want to consume my hours. I need to save my hours. I close out, I exit out. Now I still want to be safe, right? So what I go to administration, I go to environmental runtimes, and I'm gonna be checking because I want to be careful. I don't want to set bad examples. See, nothing is running right now. We are good, right? So now if I want to look at my notebook, what do I need to do? I can look at it in a read-only mode, right? How do I do it without starting the kernel? So this is a notebook. I click here and I click on a view. I can open my notebook like this, right? And here is my notebook, right? So now, important part is this, parsing data. You have an example, you have a Titanic notebook, right? Where you are predicting if the passenger is survived or died. So what you are doing is you're basically creating something called labeled document, right? And the code of the notebook is this code, labeled document, and it takes a person ID, right? In Titanic notebook, it takes person info, and the label is whether the person survived or died in the Titanic, right? The passenger. This, do not rename this parameter. It has to say label, okay? So you have that piece of code in there. What is it doing? It's parsing the data, right? Well, I can look at the Titanic notebook if that's gonna help you now. It's in another project. So just gonna go to project, and I believe in the last one I have this inserted. So, and I go, this is a Titanic notebook, right? Assets, Titanic, and because that notebook, okay, it's here. So take a look at this. So that's Titanic notebook, right? So you're given it. And what you have, this is a parser function in a Titanic notebook, right? So please do yourself a favor. Before you work on part 2 of the assignment, make sure that you understand. Well, in Titanic notebook, this is what's going on. In here, at the top, I'm listing here all the columns, right? But because in Python, indexing starts from 0. I start the first column from 0, right? You have a function in the code. What it does, it takes a row which does not contain column headers, right? It takes a row that does not contain column, or each row that does not contain column headers, and it parses it into something called label document. Label document contains 3 pieces. The first piece is see here, this is a person ID, this is a identifier, row identifier. In this case, row identifier is a person ID, and it's located in position 5. See this, values of 5. Then it also takes person info. This is a delimited list of columns that are not identifier and that are not being predicted, columns that are used as predictors. Which columns? What am I predicting here? Well, first of all, label is going to be if person survived or died, right? it's located in position 4, right? So what I'm doing here, I have to code my label as 1.0 or 0.0. So what I'm saying here, if this value in position 4, right? If it's greater than 0, I want to code it as 1.0. Otherwise, I want to code it as 0.0. That's what this piece here is doing, right? So survive, this passed into a label. Then I'm taking everything else, but why am I omitting name? Because name is an identifying information, right? First name, last name should not be used as a predictor, right? So I'm using P class, age, sex to predict if the person survived or died, right? So it's here. Make sure you understand what this piece of code is doing, because you will need to modify this code when you work on a part 2 of the assignment. See, for part 1, pretty much you have the code. The only code that you will need to do is the credentials code. Then at one place, there is a word bucket. You would need to replace bucket with bucket name from your credential. That's all that you would need to do, but for the part 1, right? Part 1 should not consume more than half an hour. You just run it, and then you save the code as HTML or as you save it, everything, all the output as PDF, and done, right? As soon as you're done, please save it. Do not wait until you're done with part 2 to save part 1. Because if you run out of hours, you at least have part 1, right? It's not nothing. You have part 1 output and you can start doing the paper. Okay? So that's pretty much that. And so you have that code. Then you also, so that explains in here what the parser function is doing. You will need to modify it. Then you're using the pipeline, but before you're doing it, there is a line of code in here where you are removing the, let me show you. So this is just the visualization, right? Everything is good. Then here, what does this do here? You are calling the parser function, but before you do that, the first row, you want to skip the row with column headers. How does it know that it's a first row? Well, one of the columns is called name, right? So there is a row, there is a cell in the row that contains the word name, something like that. So see, I did not run this whole notebook on purpose because this is your assignment, okay? So then, after that, after you remove that row, your output in here, your output in the first 5 rows. And important, if you look at the output, if you show, if the output of this cell shows the column headers, right, then you did something wrong. Then you did not remove the column headers. Please carefully check the output of this cell, because if you still see the column headers, well, some students forget to edit this line because the low birth weight data does not have a column called name. There is a column with a different name. They forget to edit this. The column headers are not removed. They're analyzing the column headers as data, and they're not getting the right results, right? Then also, there is another catch here. When you look at this, keep in mind that area under the ROC curve always has to be greater than 0.5. It's always going to be between 0.5 and 1. If your area under the ROC curve is 0.4, then obviously somewhere there are issues in the code. So I just told you that, right? So this is about the using pipelines, right? And I'll show you another example. But another thing important, when you do the credentials block, please do not forget the key instruction here. So let's look at the credentials. The key instructions are to rename this one here, this column, this variable, right? You want to rename it here twice, or you could edit the rest of the code. So probably easier to rename it twice, right? And also you want to add options in for schema true, because at some point you're looking at the age column, right? Such as average age. You don't want to be looking at the ASCII value of the age, right? You want to look at the average age, not average ASCII value of the age, etc. Okay, just an example. So now I'm gonna go to the this is a different data. So you have a patient information, right? Such as if patient is male or female, patient age, education. You know if patient is a smoker and how many cigarettes per day. You know patient's blood pressure and some other vitals. And here the goal is to see if the person has a 10-year risk of the coronary heart disease, right? So that's what we are predicting in here. Notice that you've got more columns here, right? So whenever you get more columns, you would probably want to look at correlation plots, right? Well, in your actual assignment, this is a theoretical discussion, but I wanted to give you an example. I wanted you to have an example to walk away with, right? Because these sessions should add value to what's already in a classroom. They should not subtract value from what's in a classroom. So let's look at this example. I want to make sure that I open it in a view mode. And why in a view mode? Because I don't want to be running my environment while I'm just looking at the code. So what you see here, again, column heading, you have a table of contents with bullet points. You have this table here, right, where it's an explanation of what each column does. And the goal is to predict if the person is at risk of 10-year coronary disease, right? So this was just the HTML piece that we looked at. You don't need to know HTML, but it's something that's good to have. So you get in an example and you can reuse the code when you create your notebook for part 2, right? So here we're just loading the libraries in this cell, but in this cell, this is my parser function that I'm writing. But again, I'm doing myself a favor. Why I'm listing my columns in here? Because I want to make sure that I pick the correct column position, right? So here, this piece of code in here, I'm returning the label document. And the label document, it contains what? The person, the unique identifier, something that uniquely identifies the row. And in this case, it's patient ID, and it's located at position 0. Person info, it's going to be the concatenation of columns that I use as predictors. List of columns is big, but notice that you have something like if person is a smoker and number of cigarettes per day, but obviously those two could be correlated. These two could be correlated. Why? Because, well, of course, if I smoke more than 0 cigarettes per day, then of course I'm a smoker, right? So probably you would want to run analysis with one or the other, not both, right? Well, I was playing with different, you see a lot of comments because I was playing with different combinations of predictors, but I just leave this uncommented. What I did was also, I looked at it, which column we are predicting, right? We have to edit the code because the column list is different from Titanic data. So I know that that what I'm predicting is in position 16. So what I'm doing here is that if it's greater than 0, then it's 1.0, otherwise it's 0.0, because the label has to be either 1.0 or 0.0, right? So here, values of 0. So see, basically the function, the function is taking the whole line, right? It's taking the whole line from the CSV file. I'm parsing the CSV files that I read. And the one line, it has what, 17 elements. Start labeling from 0 through 16, right? So you know the element ID for each of these. And so this is the middle one, right? The middle one is a delimited list, the delimited list of columns that you use as a predictor. I edited that, and also I had to edit the row where I'm calling it from, right? So if I look at it, so what is this? This is where I'm just reading the data, right? And I had to put in for schema true. That's because when I look at the average blood pressure, perhaps, I don't want to look at the ASCII value of the blood pressure. I want to analyze my blood pressure, right? And same thing, I've got the age column, etc. Right? So here, so this is just the data exploration. That's what it's doing. And here, I'm just doing the count. I want to see, and if you see it, what's happening in here. Also, see the difference. You also have the skewed data because you have way more people, right, who are not at risk than are at risk, right? So what are you doing here? Is this just the cross tabulations, different visualizations, right? That's what you'll be doing for your part 2. You're going to be doing the visualizations, right? And of course, I can visualize one column at a time, or you can do what I was doing, and I'll show you what I did. I gave you that piece of code for you here. So this is a function. So this is what I'm doing here is this function, draw histogram. It takes your data frame and a list of columns, number of rows, number of columns as an input, and it's going to produce this nice plot like this. So I wanted to visualize, I wanted to do the histograms for all columns at once. You don't have to do it, but this is a code that I want you to take away with from this session. Because this session, again, it's supposed to add value to what is in the classroom, and I want you to have this little piece. So if you had this data set in real life, you probably wanted to do something like this. And you probably wanted to add another check if the column is numeric, because in this specific scenario, all columns are numeric, right? So what it's just doing, it's doing the histogram for all of these plots, right? This is a pairwise plot, and you're using the Seaborn library, right? So this is just a little bonus to what is in the classroom. So that's a library, you can do that, and you're gonna like this. So what this does is, I could see my correlations plot. And why you would want to look at correlations? Because see, there are a lot of columns, and you want to eliminate the collinear columns. And in here, as I mentioned, you have cigarettes per day, and if mother is a smoker, probably you want to look at one and not the other, right? You probably don't want to look at both, because of course, if I'm smoking 5 or 10 cigarettes per day, of course I'm a smoker, right? So those two, the correlation is high, right? So if you look at it, it's a Seaborn package that you're using, and you call in the heat map function, and you're parsing the data frame. Here I just specify if I want to annotate, which is true. And here is just the width, the thickness of the line. So you could tweak however you wanted to, but take a look. The color code shows the strength, and the correlation goes between 1 and -1, right? So probably you want to look at something close to 0.7 between the two columns, and you probably want to use one or the other, but not both, right? Well, you're asked to how would you improve the accuracy of the data? So that's one topic to discuss, right? Well, your data set that you're using, it's not large, but on large data set, you probably want to do this. Then you're asked to look at other methods which you could use. That question is theoretical. So probably you may want to look into naive Bayes and decision tree. So you just discuss it, right? But again, if you look at the naive Bayes, there is assumption of independence, right? So there is an assumption that my predictors are independent. How do I know if they're independent? So here it comes. You probably need to discuss the correlation plots. I'm not saying that you would have to do it, but this is just perhaps theoretical. And this is so diastolic blood pressure. And if you look at this column, well, more likely if you have a diastolic, high diastolic, you're probably going to have a high systolic, right? Oh, but this is the hypertension. Well, of course, if you have high blood pressure, you might have the hypertension. So see, those two are, obviously there is a correlation, right? So you probably want to keep one or the other. So what else is here? It's doing here, it's just checking the number of records. Oh, and here, this line is important. What it's doing here, it's calling the parser function to call the method. But take a look at what it's doing. What is this? Well, because we need to eliminate the column headers. How do I know which line in the code contains column headers? There is something called patient ID in a cell, right? Because this is a column name. So I am excluding, see? This is the filter function, right? And see what it's doing here. It's applying. It's saying that the line, you want to exclude the line that contains patient ID text, right? Which is a line with column headers. It's going to exclude. Then it's going to call the parse document function, and it's going to parse it line by line, right? So here are the records. Then you need to split the data into training and test set. In here, I use 0.7 and 0.3. In Titanic example, you're using 0.8 and 0.2, so you could try different split too, right? Then I'm just checking how many rows I have in the training set and the test set. But take a look at this here. I don't have column headers in the first row. If I had column headers in the first row, it means that something went wrong, right? So that's a catch thing. So here, split data. Then I'm running the method on the training set, and I am validating the method on a test set, right? And I'm checking the accuracy of prediction. But this is what it's doing. The output here, it shows the probability. This is a dense vector. It shows the probability of each value. The probabilities of value of 0.0 and probability of value of 1.0, right? So here the prediction is 0 because it has the highest probability. So the prediction is the value with a higher probability. So see, that's a record where it's 1. The patient is at risk. Because here, this one here, it has a higher probability, right? So this output here is just the probabilities. And you look at the value of highest probabilities. That's how you know, that's how the method works. Then you need to look at how many, you want to look at how many patients were predicted at risk, right? And that are at risk, and how many were predicted at risk that are not at risk, right? So you want to look at the false positive and the true negatives. You want to look at the cross tabulation here. It's not quite confusion matrix that you used to seeing, but it's a cross tabulation. So you want to look at how many people are at risk that were predicted as at risk, right? How many people are not at risk that were predicted as not at risk? But then you're also looking at, I have, how many people do I have that were not predicted as at risk, which are at risk, or other way around, right? And you also look at other metrics. You want to make sure in your papers that you discuss F measures, that you discuss the precision recall, so that's your assignment, to discuss other metrics, and make sure that the area under the RAP curve plot, it has to be between 0.5 and 1. Otherwise, if it's not, then you need to go back to the drawing board. Something is wrong, right? So please double check, okay? That was a bonus example, and I spelled out the code that I did for you. This is a bonus code. That's for you to walk away with. It's not necessarily that you have to do it, but, well, for part 2, what you need to do at least is you have to have the table of contents, right? Like I have my table of contents. You have to have some data description. You need to have some data visualizations, right? To explore the relationships. And immediately, if you do the histogram for the column, for the low birth weight column, you will see something very important immediately if you do the histogram. So please take a look at this, right? Make sure that you edit the parser function. Some students just take the parser function from Titanic example and plug it in without editing. It's wrong because they end up predicting if mother is a smoker instead of predicting if person is at risk for giving the low birth weight baby, right? If mother is is at risk of delivering the underweight baby. Instead, they're predicting if mother is a smoker because the columns that you are predicting are in a different position in the data set, right? Make sure that you actually do not open a file after you download it from the classroom, upload it as is, and you're gonna have this example. You don't need to run it, right? You can just open it in a notebook editor if you like, or you can just open it in a view mode. I uploaded it, immediately stop the kernel. After you upload it, immediately stop the kernel. Make sure nothing is running and open it in a view mode, and you get this example, right? You're gonna get this file. Now, another thing that I could show you is how many of you have you attempted the ungraded exercise for the last assignment? Since we have time, I can go over the answer key for ungraded exercise for the last assignment. I'm going to open this file. Okay. Do you remember last assignment, you had ungraded exercises, right? On employee attrition data. So what you were asked to do is you were asked to list the department. In the first exercise, you were asked to list the department, the salary, and the number of employees to whom it applies. So here is the answer. In the select clause of the query, you have to put the department, salary, then you're counting, right? But very important, the columns, every non-aggregate column, right? You also needs to be added to the group by clause of the query. So you add the group by, you add department and salary to the group by clause of the query, right? Order by, why are you converting to the uppercase? Well, because, well, notice that some departments, like sales, it's spelled in all lowercase. IT is all capital. Some departments have initial a capital letter, right? You want your sorting to be case insensitive. So you convert it to uppercase for the sorting purposes, right? You don't have to, but just know this. Then what you need to do, you're asked to add another level of difficulty here. You're asked to add the attrition. So you want something like this. You want to have the department name. You want to have the salary. You want to know if the person left or stayed, and how many people it applies, right? So you added the attrition column to the select list. You select clause. Then you also need to add attrition column to the group by clause. That's it, right? It's that simple. Next exercise, you were asked to count how many people left, how many people stayed. There is more than one solution. So the way I did was I took the sum of that column, because if the value in attrition column is a 1, it means that the person left, right? So what I did was I just take the sum and I got it, right? If I take the count, I know how many people I have in the department. But if I take count minus the sum of attrition, then I get how many people stayed. That's one way. Another way is to write something called the case statement. Is that taking a case statement and you're taking the sum. If the person is left, if the person left, you treat it as a 1. If the person stayed, you treat it as a 0, and you take a sum, right? That's one way, right? You add in a case statement. When attrition is 0, then it's a 1, right? Otherwise, it's a 0, and you count it. You sum it up. So that's one way, right? Using this case statements. All right. So this type of query will come up in next assignment. So you're gonna have I'm gonna give you this answer key. I hope everybody submitted that assignment. It was due 1 week ago, right? Okay. Are there any questions? Let me see if there are questions. Guys, questions, please, please. I would like to have your questions. Anything that you want me to cover? Anything that you think might help. Of course, I'm not gonna give the solution for part 2, but I gave you the tips for part 2. So if you're doing well, you for first part of assignment 2 should not take more than half an hour. Okay, half a capacity hour. Part 2 is where the hours will be spent. So please prepare the code ahead of time, right? So that you're not keeping the notebook in edit mode a long time. You might use other notebook editors that you may have learned in a prior coursework, right? Or you might edit the code in the notepad and paste when you already do what works for you. Part 3 of the assignment is a little bit of the research and also review from your last coursework, right? Remember, you talked about what happens if the accuracy of the model on a training set is 95% and on a test set is only 30%. It's not good, right? It indicates overfitting, so review what overfitting is and approaches to handle it, etc. So those are more like theoretical questions. That piece can be done. But if you run out of hours, well, you want to put the ticket in because we need to know the status of your assignment or how far you got. But please, please, as soon as you're ready, right, make sure that you save your part 1 as an HTML or as a PDF, right? Don't wait to run out of hours to do it, because if you run out of hours, you won't be able to open the notebook in edit mode, right? You're gonna be getting the error that you're out of hours. And I believe at some point it's going to give you a warning. I don't recall how many hours left when you get the warning. But hopefully we don't need to be there, okay? Hopefully everybody learned how to use the cloud by now. All right? Anything you want me to go over, please, please, please ask. Let me see. Do we have page limit for papers that we will submit? No. There is no explicit page limit. However, when you write, you want to stay on a topic, right? It does not say that it has to be no more than 15 pages. Well, the reason it was there in the lower courses because people tend to, they think that going beyond means going outside the scope of the assignment. No, it does not mean going outside the scope of the assignment. But also, I don't want anybody to tell the teachers that, I did not do the results interpretation because I hit the number of pages limit. No, no, no. That's not how that works, okay? So no, there is no limit, but your paper wants to stay on the topic, right? You want to explain the results, don't just present the results. You want to interpret the findings, and probably if I was going to interpret the findings, my interpretation will be different from yours, I'm sure, right? Then you don't need to run another method. You need to describe, right? Why do you think naive Bayes would have worked, right? So try to apply what you see in the reading. So there is no limit, but again, you don't want to write the 100 pages novel, right? The 100 pages technical book, or if you want to call it that way. You want to stay on the topic, you want to answer, you want to go beyond, but going beyond does not mean writing, it does not mean, see, it's quality over quantity, I would say. Did I answer the question?
Sure, thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, please, questions, I love questions. Questions are good because others have the same questions when they watch the recording, I'm sure. All right? So that's three parts, right? And you will be submitting the notebook. Please do not forget to submit the notebook output because otherwise the works cannot be graded. So I'm telling you which mistakes your classmates, your schoolmates made over the years that get them in trouble. Another thing was not doing the work on time because later on, who knows, maybe they're gonna have another Spark version. This version is deprecated, only next version is available, and you're stuck, right? If you didn't do your assignment on time, you will have to use the next version, but Yelena did not test the assignment in the next version. Maybe sometimes the code needs a little bit of tweaking, who knows, right? So those are the risk factors, and and be careful, watch out for the hours, make sure you stop the kernel, and you will be good. Trust me. A lot of people do very well on the assignments if they follow the instructions. So you want to be the one who does well, submit the work on time, try to get the work done as soon as possible. I'm not saying jump into assignment without reading the examples, without watching this recording, but I mean, not waiting until the last minute because it really, the work in this course piles up, okay? So trust me, just piles up before you know, and well, you want to stay on schedule in any graduate course you take, so yeah. And I'm there to help. Submit tickets as needed, right? But most of the errors in part 2 happen in a parser function. Something is wrong. You're probably using the wrong column as a predictor. Sometimes the student might be using the same column as, like for example, see here, I'm trying to predict is position 16, right? I don't want to be using the same columns that I'm predicting also as a predictor. I want to watch out the positioning of the columns, right? So that's one issue here. Some do not set it to 1.0, they set it to 1 instead of 1.0. Some people do not check this for 0 or 1, they check it for something else, or check in the wrong column. So that's one reason people get stuck on this assignment. Most of the issues in part 2 happen in the parser function. So please pay close attention. That's why I gave you an example, extra example to have, right? And I went over parser for Titanic. So please watch the recording and you're gonna have the slides. Make sure that makes sense, okay? Well, I'm trying to help you, and I know exactly the difficulties that students had in the past semesters, and I'm trying to prevent issues, right? So that's why sometimes I sound like a broken record, but unfortunately this time, this semester, 2 people did not get the message and they entered credit card number, which is sad, but good news are they still had the code. They still had the feature code that they did not use. So we could figure something out. But once you already used up your code, you're not gonna get one until next year, which is, you know. So you want to watch out. I give you things to watch out for. And same thing is gonna be in a few weeks. You're gonna have another session for the DB2, and I'll show you a lot of I'll show a lot of advanced SQL in that session. So please try to make time to attend, okay? Please try. Then you can ask questions, and it just to help you. I'm here to help you because I was a student also, and I realize that you do need somebody who has been through it, let's say, okay? All right. Any questions? Questions? No questions? Well, let me see the chat. Oh, sure, most welcome. And I'm gonna give you the slides, I'm gonna give you this example, and I'm gonna give you a copy of the data, right? So in case later on, if you want to refer to this example in the future, and if you want to play with it, you will have it, okay? But remember, if you do want to play with it later, you will need to edit the credentials block because the notebook I'm giving will have my credentials block in it, right? Your credentials are gonna be yours. Okay? All right. So if there are no questions, I'm gonna call it a night, right? I'm gonna let's see. Okay, I'm gonna end the recording, and I want to thank you all for attending. Okay, stop the recording.